There was a man who went duck hunting alone at a lake. Unexpectedly, after that, he vanished without a trace. After an initial investigation, the police believed he had an accident during the hunt and fell into the lake. However, strangely, the rescue team searched the entire lake but found no sign of him. Where did he really go? What hidden motives were behind this incident? Next, I'll tell you this story. Background and Mike Williams' life. The incident took place in the state of Florida, located in the southeastern United States, a famous vacation destination. In northern Florida, there's the city of Tallahassee, the state capital, with a unique natural and cultural environment. The main character is Jerry Michael Mike Williams, born on October 16, 1969 in Broadfordville, near Tallahassee. As he grew up, Mike excelled academically and was admitted to Florida State University, majoring in political science and urban planning. Mike was an excellent student, served as student body president, and was easy to get along with. Due to his family's modest means, Mike worked part-time jobs during college to cover his tuition. Before graduating, he was hired by Ketchum Realty, a real estate appraisal company, as an appraiser. The company owner praised Mike as the hardest working person I've ever met. During college, Mike met a girl named Denise Olanda Merrill. Mike was deeply attracted to Denise, and the two quickly fell in love. In 1994, at age 25, Mike advanced well in his career thanks to his outstanding abilities, earning an annual salary of up to $200,000, a pretty good income at the time. That same year, Mike married Denise. The couple bought a high-end home in eastern Tallahassee and lived a comfortable life. Besides his hard work, Mike had a major hobby, duck hunting on lakes. Whenever holidays came, he would go hunting alone or invite friends and family along. In 1999, their family welcomed a new member. Their daughter, Ansley, was born in May. Initially, the family of three lived a peaceful, happy life. However, no one expected that Mike would suddenly disappear during a hunting trip, and no one knew where he went. The day of the disappearance, December 16th, 2000. Now, let's turn back the clock to December 16th, 2000, a Saturday. Early in the morning, Mike got up early and decided to go duck hunting at Lake Seminole for the weekend. Lake Seminole is a large reservoir famous for big bass fishing in the summer and duck hunting in early winter. The lake has many wild ducks, fish, and American alligators. Lake Seminole is about 100 kilometers from Tallahassee, a drive of about an hour and a half. Before dawn, Mike took his hunting rifle, drove his Ford Expedition, and left home. By noon, at 12 o'clock, Mike's wife Denise noticed her husband hadn't returned and became worried. That day was their 6th wedding anniversary. When he left home early that morning, Mike had promised Denise he would be back before noon to go out with her for a celebratory dinner. But now it was noon, and not only had Mike not returned, but his phone was unreachable. What made Denise even more anxious was that Mike had forgotten to tell her exactly where he was going hunting. Denise called Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. Brian and Mike had known each other since high school and were very close. Denise thought maybe Brian knew where Mike went. After receiving the call, Brian said Mike might have gone to Lake Seminole because he had mentioned it a few days earlier.
Brian invited his father Marcus to drive to Lake Seminole to check if Mike was there. When they arrived at Lake Seminole, they walked along the shore and sure enough, found Mike's Ford Expedition not far away. This confirmed that Mike had come there to hunt ducks that day. The two waited by the vehicle, thinking Mike would return soon. But they waited a long time, past the best hunting period, and still didn't see Mike. This made them uneasy. The initial search. That afternoon, Denise, worried about her husband, drove from home to Lake Seminole. She feared Mike had an accident, so she contacted the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, an agency that manages state fish and wildlife resources, enforces related laws, and handles some lake rescues. After receiving the report, the rescue team dispatched a helicopter to search the lake surface near where Mike's vehicle was found. They quickly spotted a small boat anchored by a reed bed near many wooden stumps, but there was no one on board. The boat was found about 225 feet, around 69 meters, from the shore in the Stump Field area, Jackson County, Florida. On the boat were Mike's hunting rifle and personal items, but he was nowhere to be seen. The rescue team guessed Mike's boat might have hit the wooden stumps, causing him to fall into the water, an accidental mishap. Next, they searched the lake bottom and surrounding areas where the boat was found to locate Mike. But strangely, despite searching a large area of about 10 acres, around 4 hectares, they still found no trace. The search continued until evening, when dark clouds gathered and a storm was approaching. For safety reasons, they paused the search. The rescue team told Mike's family that he might have had an accident, and based on experience, the body would surface in 3 to 7 days, or might decompose. In any case, they would find Mike. The alligator theory and ending the search. By February 2001, 2 months after Mike's disappearance, during this time, the rescue team conducted salvage operations on the lake almost daily, and divers also dove to the lake bottom to search. But Mike did not surface as predicted. Since Mike's family did not object to the police's initial conclusion that Mike drowned, the case was not investigated in other directions. Mike became the only drowning victim at Lake Seminole whose body never surfaced. This was very strange. A new theory was proposed, leading everyone to believe Mike would never surface. Lake Seminole is a large lake with lots of aquatic plants at the bottom and alligators inhabiting it. Possibly, Mike fell into the water, was swept by currents into a bed of aquatic weeds, got entangled, and couldn't float up. After that, alligators discovered him and devoured him. Even if devoured by alligators, remnants might remain, but experts pointed out that these remnants could be digested by surrounding fish. In this way, Mike completely vanished in Lake Seminole. The alligator theory was accepted by many, including Mike's wife, Denise. She thought after searching for 43 days without finding him, continuing would just waste manpower and had little meaning. So she agreed to end the salvage and held a memorial service for her husband the next day. The matter seemed settled, but the story was far from over. New discovery after 6 months. 6 months after Mike's disappearance, in June 2001, a fisherman was fishing on Lake Seminole. Suddenly, he saw something floating on the lake surface in the distance. Curious, he steered his boat closer and discovered it was a pair of waders. Knowing there had been a disappearance at the lake months earlier, he called the Lake Management Authority and reported the waders. The authority sent divers to search the lake bottom around where the waders were found. They found a lightweight hunting jacket and a flashlight. In the jacket pocket was a hunting license with Mike's name. The diver reported that at the lake bottom where the jacket and flashlight were found, there was alligator feces. This discovery made everyone even more convinced of the alligator theory. A week later, in July 2001, the court issued Mike's death certificate, legally confirming his death. But Mike's mother, Cheryl, could not accept this outcome no matter what. She didn't believe her son had an accident and demanded a police investigation. Cheryl believed that even if her son had an accident, at least his body should be found. But the court had issued the death certificate, the police had closed the case, and almost everyone believed the alligator theory. Cheryl's efforts and the 2004 reinvestigation. In the following years, Cheryl used her savings to place ads in local newspapers to draw more attention. She persistently believed her son was still alive. Starting in 2012, she sent daily letters to Florida Governor Rick Scott demanding the case be reopened. Thanks to her persistence, the case saw a turning point. In 2004, 4 years after the disappearance, due to Cheryl's persistence, the case caught the attention of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE. They deemed the case suspicious and decided to reinvestigate. After reviewing the old case files, they discovered that when Mike's boat was found, the fuel tank was full and the engine was off. Assuming Mike had driven the boat out on the lake with the engine running, if he fell into the water, the engine would continue until the fuel ran out. But the tank was full, a detail that hadn't been emphasized before. Previously, everyone believed Mike encountered alligators underwater and thus didn't surface. But the new investigators noted the disappearance date was December 16th, in winter, with low temperatures. Water temperature 46 to 58 degrees Fahrenheit, about 8 to 14 degrees Celsius. Air temperature average 55 degrees Fahrenheit, about 13 degrees Celsius. Alligators typically don't feed in cold winter. They consulted an alligator expert who confirmed the temperature was too cold for alligators to be interested in food. They also learned that 6 months after the disappearance, the rescue team found Mike's jacket and flashlight, with alligator feces nearby. But water tests showed no traces of body decomposition. The biggest suspicion? The jacket was intact, with no animal bite marks or residues, and no signs of long submersion. The flashlight was undamaged and even worked when turned on. There were also no teeth marks on the waders. These suspicions made the investigators think the case wasn't so simple. However, restarting the investigation was challenging because it was initially treated as an accident, with no site preservation or evidence collection. After the court issued the death certificate, the items were returned to the family, leaving no evidence preserved. The case had suspicions, but insufficient evidence, so the police couldn't file it. The case became a cold case. Continued efforts and the 2008 insurance discovery. Mike's mother, Cheryl, continued to advocate for the case. She often went alone, holding signs about Mike's disappearance, wandering the streets, hoping someone could help find her son. She believed Mike was still alive. In 2008, 8 years after the disappearance, the Florida Department of Financial Services Insurance Fraud Division collaborated with the Department of Law Enforcement. This division specializes in investigating insurance fraud. They discovered that if the alligator theory was debunked, Mike might still be alive. Investigators found an unusual point. When the court issued the death certificate, Denise submitted one of Mike's insurance policies with a small amount, so no one paid much attention. But in reality, Mike had several other high-value policies that Denise didn't disclose to the court. Afterward, Denise received a total of $1.75 million from various insurance companies, including $1 million from a policy Brian sold in 2000 and hid it from everyone. Additionally, in 2005, 4 years after the death certificate, Denise publicly began a romantic relationship with Brian Winchester and soon married him. Coincidentally, Brian was an insurance broker and all of Mike's policies were handled by him. Denise and Brian were now living in the house Mike had bought. If Mike was still alive, there was suspicion of insurance fraud. If Mike was dead, Denise and Brian were major suspects in the crime. But 8 years had passed. Mike hadn't been found, and the inferences were theoretical without evidence. The police suspected Denise and Brian, but lacked enough evidence to charge them. The truth seemed about to sink forever, but the case had another turn. The 2016 incident and Brian's confession. On August 5, 2016, a Friday, Mike had been missing for 16 years. Denise and Brian had divorced a year earlier, divorced in 2015. That morning, Denise went to work as usual, approached her car, and opened the door. As she sat in, suddenly a man rushed out from the bushes and got into the back seat. This man was none other than her ex-husband, Brian. He pulled out a gun, threatened Denise to drive, and shouted that he didn't want the divorce. After the divorce, Denise had blocked all of Brian's contact methods, so he couldn't reach her and came up with this plan to convince her to reconcile. Brian said if she didn't remarry him, there was no point in living and he would end his life. Denise carefully comforted Brian and said she agreed to remarry and wouldn't tell the police about today. Brian gradually calmed down. Afterward, Denise stopped the car by the roadside, waited for Brian to get out, then drove straight away without looking back to the police station, recounting the entire incident to the police. After hearing Denise's statement, the police immediately arrested Brian. Over a year later, the case went to trial. Since Brian's armed threat to Denise was captured on surveillance video, the evidence was solid. The court declared Brian guilty of kidnapping and sentenced him to 20 years in prison. The day after the court's announcement, unexpectedly, Brian told the prosecutors a shocking secret. He knew all the causes and consequences of Mike's disappearance that year. He reached an agreement with the prosecutors. If Brian revealed everything that happened and identified the suspects, the prosecutors would not charge him additionally for the murder, but he still had to serve 20 years for the kidnapping. Brian agreed and confessed that he had killed Mike, under Denise's direction. Confession details and the truth of the case. The timeline goes back to October 13th, 1997, 3 years before the incident. At a friend's gathering, Brian and Denise developed feelings for each other and began secretly dating behind Mike's back. But they knew such a sneaky relationship wasn't sustainable and would eventually be discovered by Mike.
Brian wanted Denise to divorce Mike and marry him, but Denise, due to religious reasons and her family, wouldn't agree to divorce, and she already had a child with Mike, fearing she'd lose custody. For her daughter's sake, Denise refused to divorce. As time passed, starting in March 2000, Denise and Brian changed their minds and began carefully planning how to make Mike disappear from the world. On the day of the crime, Mike drove to Lake Seminole for duck hunting, and Denise immediately called Brian to inform him. The police initially didn't check call records because it was treated as an accident, not a criminal case, so the investigation wasn't thorough.
Brian received the call and met Mike at a gas station on Thomasville Road near I-10. They drove to the lakeshore, Mike in his Ford Expedition, Brian following in a white Chevy Suburban. They launched the boat into the water. Brian pretended to run into him by chance. Mike was thrilled to see Brian and eagerly invited him to join the hunt on the boat. Brian gladly agreed. Both put on waders and drove the boat out to the lake to hunt. When they reached a spot on the lake, Brian saw Mike stand up and pushed him from behind. Mike lost his balance and fell into the water. Brian thought the waders filling with water would weigh him down and make him sink. After falling in, Mike immediately called for help from Brian, thinking his good friend would save him, but Brian stood on the boat, coldly watching. After calling for help in vain, Mike didn't give up. With all his strength, he removed his waders and jacket, swam to the shore near where the boat was found, an area with many wooden stumps. Mike grabbed one of the stumps and escaped danger. Brian on the boat was shocked, fearing if Mike escaped, he'd realize the intent to harm him. He drove the boat circling around Mike, then raised his 12-gauge shotgun, bought cheaply from an FSU student, and fired at Mike's face. With the gunshot, Mike fell into the water. Then Brian dragged the body to shore, loaded it into the vehicle, pushed the boat back out on the lake, destroyed the gun, and discarded the pieces along the way. He bought a blue tarp and shovel at Walmart on North Thomasville Road, transported the body to the end of Gardner Road near the dry shore of Carr Lake, about 60 miles or 96 kilometers away, and buried it in a 2-foot-deep hole, about 60 centimeters. After finishing, he returned to Lake Seminole to pretend to search for Mike with others. Regarding the clothing found at the lake bottom 6 months later, Brian secretly threw them into the lake one night to make everyone believe Mike drowned in Lake Seminole. Investigation results and verdict. After learning this information, the police dispatched officers to the location Brian described with search dogs. They found Mike's remains on October 18, 2017, in the mud, along with clothing, winter gloves, booties, and wedding ring, confirmed by DNA from Cheryl's sample, with 98% of the bones intact and shotgun pellets in the skull. With sufficient evidence, the police arrested Denise on May 8, 2018, charging her with first-degree murder, conspiracy to murder, and accessory after the fact. From December 10 to 14, 2018, the case went to trial in Tallahassee. When the prosecutors asked if Denise was involved, she always evaded the question, Brian admitted in court to killing Mike and accused Denise of planning it all. They shared the large insurance payout after marrying. The jury quickly reached a verdict after deliberation. The court declared Denise guilty of murder and sentenced her to life without parole plus 30 years. Denise appealed. Her lawyer argued there was no evidence she masterminded the murder. In November 2020, the appeals court reversed the murder conviction but upheld the conspiracy. And in September 2021, she was resentenced to 30 years for conspiracy to murder. The Florida Supreme Court declined to review it in 2021. Mike's mother, Cheryl, attended the entire trial in the courtroom. When she heard the verdict, tears streamed down her face. If not for her persistent search over 17 years, the truth would never have been uncovered. In this case, the most heartbroken person was undoubtedly Cheryl. After her son's disappearance, she lived in pain every day. Moreover, her granddaughter, under Denise's influence, had a strained relationship with her for over a decade. Fortunately, the perpetrators, Denise and Brian, were punished by the law. After the truth came out, Cheryl's granddaughter finally forgave her. For Cheryl, this was very important, as her granddaughter was her only family left in the world.